We'll wait and see about that, which brings us now to a special segment. We'll get back to our best bets from this limited 3-game card. It's slim pickings, but we're each still going to have a best bet at the end of the show. We'll get to that in about 15 minutes time or so. But right now, we're going to do a midseason recap, and really, we're going to just each give one bet on, one bet against team for the rest of the season. And usually what I like to do is go with teams maybe that have overachieved as a bet against moving forward, teams that maybe have underachieved as a bet on team moving forward. So I'll start with that. I am going to, this is a little bit of a leap of faith because they've not really shown you much of anything so far to this point in the season. But I'm going to go bold here. It makes the show more interesting. I'm going to give the Edmonton Oilers a puncher's chance to show me they can be a profit producer in the second half of the season and get their shit together and at least be a plus units hockey team in terms of profitability from now to the end of the regular season. I think there is still that potential with this team. Of course, you can't live on potential. I understand that. You got to make it happen on the ice. You got to show it in your results. To me, all that's going to be required is getting some secondary scoring to help out the likes of McDavid and Draisaitl. Cam Talbot's at least giving you, on most nights, a chance to win for this Edmonton Oilers team. Now that he's back, again, he was dealing with injuries for a large part of the first half of that season, and they had to deal with Laurent Brossoit, who was simply not playing very, very well at all in net for the Oilers. So I'm going to give them a chance to show me something that they could turn this around. This is still a team that, I think has a run in them, especially now you got Peter Chiarelli saying the coach is fine. He's not going anywhere. Todd McClellan. This still could be a rally the troops situation here for Edmonton. And all I'm asking Edmonton to do is because now they've been devalued as well because of how poorly they've played this season. Just be plus units between now and the end of the regular season. That's my goal with Edmonton. And that's why I'll circle them as a team, at least in spots, that I'll be looking to bet on the rest of the way. My bet against team the rest of the way, and I give them credit for the way they've played so far. They've been one of the big surprise stories in the Western Conference. The Winnipeg Jets, I'm not sure this team's got long-term profitable sustainability in them. For as good as things have gone for the Winnipeg Jets, there's still some warts on this team defensively. They let the Buffalo Sabres of all teams, Buffalo Sabres now, get back in the game a little bit against them the other night when they had a big lead. I'm still not sold on this team's ability to defend on a nightly basis. They can do it at times, but it's not consistent. It's not as strong a defensive core as some other teams, particularly in the Western Conference, have. And even though Connor Hellebuck has made the All-Star team for the Central Division, and give him credit, he's earned it. He's been good. Does he have it in him to do it again in the second half of the season? Be just as sharp and reliable night to night in between the pipes for the Winnipeg Jets, because you're not going to get reliable goaltending, I think, at this point from Steve Mason. I think that's been clear. He just hasn't been good enough the majority of his starts. You're going to need Connor Hellebuck to be that guy, that rock, that pillar of strength in net for the Winnipeg Jets. He's been that way here in the first half of the season, but this is still a guy that's not been used to playing this many games in a regular season. This is not a guy that's used to the pressure of being in a legitimate playoff chase, which the Winnipeg Jets are right now. Let's see if he can keep that up in the second half of the season. They got the offense, although I do still think eventually it hasn't shown yet because Mark Scheifele now has been out for several games, and they've been able to keep on keeping on and win games without him. I think at some point they're going to miss him a little bit. And I just think from a sustainability, can you keep up what you've done to this point of the season? Can you keep up the profitable result that you've had as a team to this point? For Winnipeg, I'm not convinced they can. So in terms of me, bet on Edmonton, sticking my neck out there a little bit on that one, but I think they're going to be a plus unit team now to the end of the season. Winnipeg, I'm going to say that they are a money burner. They will be negative units in every game between now and the rest of the regular season. So Edmonton up arrow, Winnipeg down arrow for me. Let's go around the horn. Let's go in the opposite direction. Let's start with Andrew this time. One bet on, one bet against team. Who do you think is going to have a profitable, good second half of the season, and maybe a team that's not going to have a great second half coming up?
All right, guys. Well, I don't know if, they're the 8th seed right now in the Eastern Conference. I don't really know if this is kind of a huge bet on team for, a team that's been, struggling hugely and, in a big way. But for me, I'm looking at the back-to-back defending Stanley Cup champions. I don't think they've played to their maximum potential whatsoever. They have been a little bit banged up. They haven't been looking like themselves. But I'll continue to what I've been saying about this team, and I think this is the reason why they're so successful in the second halves of most season in the playoffs, and it's simply the depth and the way that they play together, guys. They have not only just all stars, but they have so many players that just know their roles. Uh, let's look at Carl Hagelin, a guy that you wouldn't think that you'd want to draft on your team right away, or any team is craving to have guys. But he's one of those players that makes those plays in the playoffs for you, or makes those plays down the stretch late in the third period. Guys like Jake Gensel, your third line center right now, that's you can pretty much count on to make an impact on most games. And then let's talk about Sidney Crosby and Phil Kessel and Evgeny Malkin. That really they've obviously had a good start and they've looked decent, but I'm expecting a lot more out of those guys and those all stars right now, especially after that All Star break. They're going to get a little bit of rest, going to get a chance to kind of rekindle and look at the bigger picture here, guys. Because in my opinion, especially with the NHL, in comparison to most sports, I really do think that when you get to the playoffs, you don't really need to have that 1, 2, or 3 seed. I really am a big fan of the NHL where it really is about how you finish the season and what your team is looking like heading into the season, how healthy you are, what the chemistry is like, what the lines are looking like right now, and how everyone's feeling going into the playoffs. So for me, the Pittsburgh Penguins are clearly a playoff team. There's no doubt about that. But it's all about the way that they play together. And let's not mention their draft pick from a couple years ago, Daniel Sprong, who obviously battled a couple of injuries and prevented him from playing. Last year, he was sent back down to play for the Charlottetown Islanders. But what a player he is. He's strong on the puck. He's had a chance to play with Sidney Crosby these past couple of games, and he's looked very strong to me. So, again, I know they're only the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference right now. There's maybe some people are saying there's not much to worry about with them, but from what we've seen out of them guys, they haven't been this purely dominant team that I think they will be in the second half of the season. So for me, that's kind of a bet on team. I think that we'll be looked to see them kind of not blowing teams out more, but not just squeezing out those 2-1, 3-1 kind of games, if that makes any sense. And looking at my bet against teams, I was gonna say I kind of had two teams to say, guys, and I had one. Ian, it kind of reminded me when you said, just keep things interesting, keep people on their toes that are watching this show. And I'm not really sure how people are going to partake this, but I just kind of have a gut feeling about the Vegas Golden Knights right now that the Cinderella story is almost just too good to be true. And I have another team I'm going to talk about just really quickly, but let's think about this, guys. Like, I think that right now, looking at the way that they've played, it kind of reminds me of Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers. And I know it's a weird comparison, but just hear me out for a second. I think it's one of those teams where they were so sluggish for so many years and didn't really have that star power. So last year they just looked out of this world. McDavid's speed caught everyone off guard. The line chemistry around him looked good. The goaltending was decent, and it kind of hid the fact that their defense was pretty weak. And right now, I keep talking about how this Vegas Golden Knights team doesn't really have too many all-stars, but they run four lines. They work really well together. Gallant's been a good coach for them, and they've kind of taken this whole league by shock. And there's nothing really that tells me that this Vegas Golden Knights team is going to keep that up and keep their position in the standings moving forward. I think the teams are going to start to figure out what they do. They're going to start wearing this team down. And to be quite honest, I think that when they're playing bigger teams like Tampa Bay Lightning or like the Nashville Predators or even like the St. Louis Blues, I think just the experience, the star power, and just the pretty much better skill and depth on those teams are just going to match up far better than what the Vegas Golden Knights have to offer. So I do not think they're going to just completely shit the bed in the second half of the season, guys. But I just don't think they'll be that same team that we've been seeing because let's face it, I think that a lot of it has been shock factor. I mean, I'm not saying they haven't been looking great and they haven't been taking people by storm. They're a team, in my opinion, to be taken seriously. But I don't think they're this amazing Stanley Cup contending team that people think they are. Like I keep saying, the Stanley Cup playoffs are a whole new beast, and teams have to be completely different in the playoffs. So I'll just roll with that one as my team to kind of look at being a little bit different in the second half of the year. I think they're going to gain a little bit more respect with the lines and the odds. So I might look at going the other way against the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, Vegas for me could go either way because, and the thing that, and the reason why I'm kind of leaning that they come back and they're going to actually be a money loser the rest of the way is because early in the season, October, November, when this team was coming on like a freight train, taking the hockey world by storm, you were getting prices of even money and even home underdog prices with the Vegas Golden Knights at T-Mobile Arena. You know what you're getting with Vegas now? Now they are being priced like a elite, like one of the best teams in the league. Now you're laying minus 170 or 80 in a lot of Vegas home games. Now you're seeing Vegas even money on the road against a darn good St. Louis Blues team like they were a week or so ago. That wasn't the case early in the season when Vegas was still saying to people, to the hockey world, hello, we're the Vegas Golden Knights. We're going to be contenders. We're going to make the playoffs. Screw you and your expansion franchise narrative. We're going to be better than all of you son of a bitches think. And here we go. This is where they are. So the Vegas Golden Knights now, you're not getting that value. Odds makers now were caught with their pants down, and weren't ready for what was coming from this hockey team. Now they've adjusted. Now you're seeing Vegas priced like a Tampa Bay, priced like some of these Pittsburgh, some of these teams here in the league in terms of the respect on home ice. They're laying minus 150 more often than not at home. You saw, as I said, they were even money on the road against a good St. Louis team. So the numbers and the prices have caught up to how good this Vegas team has been so far this season. So from that standpoint, I don't see the value now that I saw, month or two ago to back the Vegas team. So I kind of lean toward them being a money burner as well. But we'll see. I mean, I'm not selling this Vegas team short, not one iota, but I think it's going to be tough for them to be a profitability team the rest of the way after this adjustment in prices that have been made on the Golden Knights. Dana, what are your bet against teams that you're looking at in the second half?
Yeah, interesting about the Vegas Golden Knights. I wrote a thing yesterday, just to touch on them really quick. I appreciate the National Hockey League giving these guys even more of a chip on their shoulder because obviously taking James Neal and Marc-Andre Fleury to represent the team in the West is great, and certainly James Neal and Fleury deserve that. But man, you got a guy like William Carlson that the guy could score 40 goals this year, and he's probably just sitting there going, are you serious that I can't get on this team? And I realize the logistics and the format as well, but from William Carlson's standpoint, you have to be thinking, well, that thanks once again for getting my blood boiling a little bit and saying I'm not worth it. I mean, Jonathan Marchessault has to be the same way. I mean, this is a guy, regardless of what the National Hockey League says, this is an all-star. I mean, this guy is going to be a 30-goal scorer again, and this is before we even get David Perron is, believe it or not, he's a point-a-game guy. I mean, I don't think people realize that how good of a season he is. I'd love for him to be a little bit more disciplined in some spots, but in other ways, I really like that fire that he brings to the ice. So I do appreciate the National Hockey League once again giving the Vegas Golden Knights and specifically some of their players a reason to be a little PO'd going into the second half of the season. But for me, guys, I mean, I really like the Chicago Blackhawks, and really kind of the opposite reason that you say bet against the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, this is a team early on that if you bet on them every game, you'd be down over 300 units, or based on $100 bet. This is a team that is number one in shots on goal. They're going to have to start making or at least focusing more on getting into this playoff picture. Like we talked about earlier, they're out of it. And I know that, focus is easier said than done. And, it's the same thing as determination and confidence and all those things. But, this is still a team that offensively is as good as at least the top two lines are as good as anybody else in the league. They just need to start beating the better teams, and that's always been their problem. And they could beat teams that they should beat, but they're not beating anybody that probably they're not looked to, or they shouldn't beat. Really, I'm looking for bigger words, but the vocabulary just isn't there. The good thing about the Hawks going on is that your numbers are going to be a little less inflated, which is the opposite of what Vegas is going to be. When we saw them start the season, I mean, obviously there's a huge contrast between what the odds makers think they should be right now or back then, as opposed to what we see them right now. I mean, the other night they were $1.20 home favorite, so that would certainly not be the case back in November. They still go 3 lines deep. They're going through some injury issues right now. We're not 100% certain on when Corey Crawford's going to be back. He's dealing with an upper body injury. Joe Quenneville gives us absolutely nothing as far as a timetable for his return. So that is obviously key. I don't love the goaltending combination that they have right now, but even without Corey Crawford and Anisimov, I mean, they've won 4 out of their last 7 games as an underdog. They had wins as a +6, 166 dog against Edmonton. They're plus $1.20 against New York. And keep in mind, I mean, if you win some of these plus 150, 140 games, I mean, that really, if you win 2 of those, you have to lose 3 just to lose money. So, that's a much better ratio than having to go and, obviously Tampa Bay is going to win the majority of their games moving forward, but at what price are you going to have to lay to be in bed with Tampa Bay? And I don't think that that's a team that I want anything to do with moving forward. So you're going to get some plus prices. You're going to get some, minus 110s, 120s with Chicago. And I think that they, with all the talent still remaining on that team, I think they give you a huge shot to win on a nightly basis. Bet against team for me is the Washington Capitals for the complete opposite reason as well. I think that their numbers are going to be inflated a little bit. I see the odds makers are starting to be in love with this Capital team. If you did bet the Washington Capitals so far this season, you would be up well over 900 units, but I think what's early on, you have to figure on that everybody thought that the Washington Capitals were going to take a step back, and they didn't. They did take some time to find their way, but I think that these numbers are going to be inflated moving forward for the Capitals because I think the odds makers look at them the way that they have in years past. And again, if you're going to lay $1.90, I mean, you can do the math. You lose 2 of those games or 3 of those games, and you're really looking at putting yourself in a position where you have to win 70% of your games just to cover those. For me, I think they're too heavy. They're too heavy in the top line scoring. You have a guy like Ovechkin has 27 goals, but then you move down to the number 2 spot, and Kuznetsov has 13. And yes, that equates to a 20 goal season. But I like a lot more balance with teams. And I don't think Washington has it right now. And as you said earlier on, Andrew, I think Braden Holtby is not the Braden Holtby of the past, where we could rely on him to carry the Capitals, even if they're not playing well offensively. He's allowed 3 goals or more in 5 of his last 6 games. His goals against average is well over the 2.5 mark, which is not a statistic that gives me any confidence to back them in the future. And like I said, I'm not, Washington's a 1-line team. They have the potential to be 2, but I think Kuznetsov he's been inconsistent for about a year, maybe year plus now. And I just don't know what I'm getting out of anybody on that team other than what Ovechkin brings. So books are in love with the Caps once again. They're outside of my top 10, which I know sounds ridiculous, but my power rankings are based upon which teams I think that I can bet on every single night, and the Washington Capitals are certainly a team that I look to not be involved with at all.
Yeah, I don't look to be involved with them in the playoffs. That's for sure. Washington with their track record. So there's Dana's bet on, bet against. Let's go to Alex, bet on, bet against, and then we'll get to best bets and call it a day.
You guys made some interesting, points of note, but there's a couple things that I disagree with, and I'm gonna start with my bet against team. My bet against team is the defending back-to-back Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins. And I can put it in comparison with something I said about the Blackhawks a couple of years ago when they missed out and almost made it back to the Cup after, from the 2013-2015 age. they're a team that played so many games that you could just see where games they should have won, they got completely fatigued and worn out, and they didn't show up. And eventually, that losing narrative kind of just started to trickle over, and just, all right, well, when did they start showing up? When did they start showing up? And they just completely wore themselves out and never, showed up again. That's the thing with Pittsburgh. I know, Ian, you said it often early in the year. You said this is a team that they know they can kind of just coast through the regular season and then turn things on late. But how often can you do that? And this is a division that's been tight the entire year. This Metropolitan Division has never been a joke since they formed it. You got a Ranger team that's still kind of fighting and clawing. They, pulled themselves out of the gutter early. You got a New Jersey team that turned things on early. They're kind of struggling a little bit, but they've got some good goaltending and can put some streaks together. We talked about Washington. Yeah, they suck in the playoffs, but they're a good regular season team. Columbus has some pieces that work hard every single night. So I don't see where Pittsburgh really pulls themselves out of the hole. They've had injury issues for a while. That's only gonna, help what I'm saying right now as far as them being worn out, not being able to find some consistency and rhythm. Matt Murray hasn't looked the same. These guys, they looked invincible in the playoffs the last couple of years. They don't look invincible. They look human now, and teams are making note of that. So this is a team where we see some decent prices on them, but I just don't see. I could see where they're going to get caught up more often, not on the losing end going down the stretch, and I really don't see them pulling themselves out of the mid-range hole that they're in. I don't see them getting back to the top of that Metropolitan Division. I wouldn't be shocked if they missed the playoffs altogether. So Pittsburgh's my team trending down, and my team trending up, if my jersey didn't give it away, is the Los Angeles Kings. They're a team that's played really well. They've been hanging around with the Vegas Golden Knights, and they're missing one of their key pieces for most of the year with Jeff Carter, a guy who's going to be coming back in February. You look at their schedule, they've got a stretch where they have 12 of 14 games on the road. This is a team that was playing well on the road, and they had a long trip early in the year. So if they can find ways to get some wins on the road at the end of the year, they've got a bunch of home games that they're wrapping around. So it's a team that I'm looking to be playing on. If they keep their momentum, Jonathan Quick looking much sharper this year than he has in years past. Once again, this is a team that played a lot of playoff games, looked fatigued. Then they missed a couple of spots, didn't go and get in the playoffs. Now they look a little bit more rested. It's gonna be this kind of probably the final run for some of these older guys like Marian Gaborik. The guy who probably only has maybe a year left. I think they're gonna be able to turn things up and on in the second half. We talked about a team like Las Vegas, for example, might be trending a little bit downward. I'm not sold on Calgary or San Jose. I think San Jose is another team that I actually like trending downward. So with those shaking out, I think LA is the chance to be, hang around and give Vegas a push, in that 1-2 for that Pacific Division title. So the Kings are my bet on team, and my bet down team is the Pittsburgh Penguins.
All right, excellent stuff, by the way, everybody. Good stuff, good opinions, and hopefully we did a good job being the ghosts of NHL future, so to speak, here for the second half of the regular season to come.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our channel. Now, we've put a lot of work into producing all these free videos, so please help us out and keep all our content free for you forever by simply liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Now, not to mention, a visit to our industry-leading website will warm the hearts of all our SBR employees, especially myself. Now, the links are over there to the left, so do check those out. Thanks for watching.